Welcome to Beyond Hormones, the Business of Wellness, the podcast for hormone and functional medicine providers who want a thriving, predictably profitable practice and maybe a little less stress along the way. Hi, I'm your host, Jody Lane, and I've worked with lots of clinics in marketing, sales, and business development, and I have seen what works and what doesn't. And here's what I believe. Hormone and wellness care should be available to everyone who wants it. And while providers know the medicine, many struggle with the business side of their cash practice. And that's where I come in. See, this podcast is here to share real strategies, real stories, things you can implement in your practice right away. So I am so glad you're here. Come on, let's go. Welcome back to Beyond Hormones, the Business of Wellness. I'm your host, Jody, and today we're going somewhere a little unexpected. My guest doesn't prescribe hormones. She doesn't run labs, but what she does do is fill in one of the biggest gaps I see in hormone and functional medicine practices every single day. Lexi Reed is a creative wellness coach, a PhD level researcher, and founder of Mind Art Wellness. She works with high achieving women, scientists, executives, corporate powerhouses who are drowning in stress and completely disconnected from themselves. And her tools? Well, they're not what you'd expect. We're talking about creative practices, visual journaling, and drawing exercises that literally rewire how the nervous system responds to stress. Now, here's why this matters to you as a hormone or functional medicine provider. You see, stress is silently sabotaging your patient's results. You know that. And no amount of progesterone, testosterone, or thyroid optimization is going to move the needle if cortisol is running the show. Lexi gives us a window into what your patients aren't telling you and what you can start asking so that you know what's going on outside the office. This one is a must listen episode. I am so glad you're here. All right, let's go dive in. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Beyond Hormones, the Business of Wellness podcast. I'm very excited today to introduce my guest, Lexi Reed from Mind, Art, and Wellness. And while she's not a hormone provider, she brings a lot to the table for what hormone patients and hormone providers, for that matter, really need to pay attention to when we're taking care of the full body. So, Lexi, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jody. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here and happy to chat about creative wellness and what that means for me personally and what it can mean for the women I work with.
Perfect. Well, so why don't you share a little bit about yourself? You've got kind of an interesting background. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that and what brought you to, starting your business.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I call myself a creative wellness coach, and I founded Mind Art Wellness kind of after going through burnout myself. And what surprised me most was how much stress showed up in the body, not just in my thoughts. And that's why I love these conversations about hormones and well being. So I say I help women using simple creative practices to shift out of, constant overdrive and back into more, steadiness, clarity, and self trust. And, the women I work with are typically high achievers in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And that's what my background is. I did the academic ladder, the bachelor's, the master's, the PhD, the postdoc.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
Checked
started
all
when you were
those.
4, right?
Yeah. Checked all those boxes, did research for a bit. And then I went to a not for profit. I went to the federal government. And then I ended up in corporate life working for a consulting firm. And then I basically took on the entrepreneurial role. So I've kind of stepped in a lot of camps and have experienced the environments where all of that stress and burnout does occur.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have good shared experiences and some best practices of what to do and what to don't
Yeah.
do.
No, I get that. You've done a lot in your life. Was there something that happened specifically where you said, wow, this is a problem. I'm experiencing it for myself and I want to bring this to the world to solve?
Yeah, I would say the tipping point for me was during the pandemic, which probably
Mm,
occurred for a
a
lot of
lot of
folks
people.
as well. At the time, I was working for a medical device consulting firm. We had just landed a very large contract from the Canadian government to build emergency ventilators. And
Mm,
I was in the quality and regulatory department. So it was all hands on deck to basically get this from basically design on paper to built to in the hands of the public. And so we were working pretty much 24/7 from home like everybody else, but I'm also mom and a wife, and I had two kids at home who were in middle school and high school, respectively. So it
Oy.
was, yeah, which homeschooling and Zoom and our internet would crash because too many people are using it. So,
Right.
I was going through what a lot of people were going through of burning the candle at all the ends. And up until then, I'd used art as an outlet. And I'm sure you can see in the background, I've got quite a lovely art studio, and I couldn't even make art. I was just so numb. I was so tapped out. I wasn't sleeping. It was hard to turn my brain off at night. I'd have the racing
Yeah.
thoughts, I'd have the racing heartbeat. And I was like, this can't go on. And it was funny during one of the endless Zoom calls, I just started doodling. And I'm not a big doodler. Like for me, it was like, I'm either going to go and make art, a painting or something, or I'm not going to bother, right? It's not worth the effort. But I started feeling better by doing these like little simple exercises. And so, I'm a researcher. I started looking at, art therapy and neuroscience and journaling. And there's a lot to be said for just even these simple practices where it there isn't that pressure to make good art. There isn't pressure to make something finished that you need to hang on the wall or put out to a gallery. And I thought, okay, there's something here. And I started learning about coaching and developing these little almost like visual journaling exercises.
Hmm.
And I started working with women and trying the curriculum out with them. And basically, I was kind of, designing the airplane as I was flying, right? Like this is
Right.
what a lot of entrepreneurs do, right? And, iterating and pivoting and changing things as we went along. And that's kind of and the reason I call it creative wellness is because I take the proactive approach of trying to get the stress out before it turns into burnout.
Mm.
Buying yourself that time to reflect before you can't, right? Before you're ruminating too much. And that's how I work with my clients.
Wow. It's all sort of from a doodle.
It sounds really silly, and considering I didn't
No,
do
not
much
at all.
doodling to start with, but it was that there's something simple about the hand moving and the
Yeah.
patterns and just kind of letting your brain wander. And yeah, and a lot of I've learned also if you do it to music and you do it in time with your breath, there's different ways of
Mm.
channeling that energy and grounding yourself that way.
Yeah, for sure. So before that happened, what was sort of like your opinion or thought about wellness? Did you pay attention to your wellness, or you just sort of like moved at the speed of light and didn't worry about that stuff?
I knew what I should be doing, right? Like
Mm.
we all have the shoulds, right? I should
Yeah.
be eating better. I should be sleeping more. I should be getting more exercise. And all of that would fall the wayside so fast as soon as the stress and the deadlines ramped up. It's like, well, I'll just work a little bit longer, or, I can skip lunch, or I can just eat this thing really quickly, even though I know it's crap and it's not
Right.
going to do me any good, but, I just need to eat quickly. And all of that starts adding up super fast. And, as women get older, our bodies are less forgiving of these things as well. So, yeah,
That's a
definitely
perfect
some,
segue into
yeah.
my next question because obviously that is, the clientele that most hormone providers work with. It's men and women who are getting of a certain age and their bodies aren't producing the hormones. With the work that you've done with the women who've been through your programs, they're probably seeing providers, whether they're traditional or they're wellness providers. Do you think that there's something they're not telling their providers that they should be telling and that only is coming out maybe through you because you're pulling it from them?
There's definitely I even have this with some of the women I work with in my groups, is that feeling of I can't show weakness. I can't show vulnerability. I can't show my real self because, people will step back in horror.
Yeah.
And, there's that need to have the facade, the mask, and showing the brave front. I would say, a lot of the women I work with play down their symptoms, right?
Mm,
Whether that's physical, mental, emotional, they tend to compartmentalize. I'm just going to shove that in a box because I can't deal with it right
right.
now. And I've certainly experienced that myself. If,
Me too.
yeah.
Without a doubt.
And maybe that was a survival mode tactic, but if we just do it all the time, it's not survival mode, it's just
Right.
default mode. And that doesn't do us any favors either.
Yeah. Well, and I think like you just said, everybody, especially women, we all learn to do this as a survival method, as a way to take care of all the people in our life. And when you're younger, you don't realize the impact that it's having on your physical body as much as it is on your mental state. So, are there certain physical reactions or things that you would see these women come and present with when they came to work with you that maybe some of the people listening should be paying attention to and looking for?
Well, it was funny. In one of our group sessions, we had a team no sleep and a team sleep. So there are the women that said, "Oh yeah, I sleep fine, no problem," and others that were just saying, "I can't seem to fall asleep, I can't stay asleep." So I wouldn't say that it's universal for how stress shows up, but certainly it seemed to be quite distinct. The ones that were experiencing the same or similar symptoms to others. So definitely there's some commonalities, but also some differences, like how some totally would eat everything in sight, had the
Yeah.
munchies. Others couldn't eat anything at all. And, each camp went, well, I wish I had that problem. It's funny how it manifests in the body and our coping mechanisms. But again, a lot of that comes down to circumstances and how culturally how you're raised, things that you experienced as a kid. All these things come at with a context feel to them. But certainly there was a lot of shared experiences, certainly when we talked about things as well too.
Do you ever, like, when you're going through the coaching program with these women, do you go beyond just the creative process with them and, like, maybe recommend that they do some additional support with a provider, or do you kind of keep it to your lane and that's pretty much as far as you go?
As far as recommendations, we shared a lot of experiences, certainly for the women who had looked at doing hormone replacement therapy. They shared their experiences. I didn't make recommendations one way or the other, saying, other than if you think it would help, I would say, yeah, talk to your medical
Absolutely.
provider. I had some women who had reached out to naturopaths,
Hmm.
homeopaths. Everyone had their own experiences. It definitely having yes, I have a PhD, but I'm not a medical doctor, nor am I a therapist. So I would not stray into those lanes personally, but I let the women share what was working for them. And like I shared my experience about acupuncture. I personally, up until I thought, well, I tried all the other avenues. I tried, some physiotherapy, and I tried stretches, and I tried weight routines. And then I was just talking to my physiotherapist, and he's like, how about acupuncture? And I thought, oh, hell, why not? Like,
Why not? Exactly. It can't hurt.
well, it can't hurt any more than,
Right.
these things that aren't working, right? So I shared my experience with that and, how that helped release some tension that I just couldn't get at in a different
Sure.
way. But I wouldn't make a strong recommendation for somebody other than saying, be open to trying it. And that would be how I'd leave it.
Which I think is wonderful. I think giving people the space to choose something that may not be as traditional as they grew up to believe is the way, that you handle your health is such an important first step. It really is. So if someone were to find your website, which is mindartwellness.com, and we'll put that in the show notes, so anybody who does want to look her up, they can. But if someone comes to your website and they're interested in what you do, how do you, like, talk us through what you do with somebody? Do you do like a consult with them so that you can talk through what the right program is, and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few free resources that exist already on my website. So there's a newsletter that I send out weekly with sort of a mix of mindset, wellness, and creativity tips. So that's just one resource that a lot of people. There's a 5-day free challenge where they can get a sample of what it's like to do some creative coaching on their own. It comes as an email 5 days in a
I
row.
love
So
that.
it's nice and easy. And definitely, I do what I call clarity calls. Some people call them discovery calls. And that's where I'll get to talk one on one with a potential client and get a feel for what she's going through. And then I
Hmm.
can make recommendations. Yes, I have a group cohort. Do you want to work with a group? Are you interested in getting more tailored individual attention? And that's where the one on one coaching. And I do both. So it comes down very much to what she comes to me with, what
Yeah.
problems. Certainly, if it's a deeper dive, one on one is the way to go. But sometimes you just need that shared community feeling, and that's where
Yeah.
the group would be more appropriate.
Yeah, for sure. So you talk a lot on your website about stress, and I think that we as a general society overlook the real importance that stress plays on our body. Do you see things like as you're working with somebody over time, certain things that maybe were symptoms of stress that start to kind of alleviate? And like what are you noticing from the women that you're working with when they're going through your program?
Well, a lot of them are hesitant to join because it's just one more thing to add to their to-do
Yeah,
list.
I
They're
didn't even
already,
think about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're already stretched for time, right? Like that's,
Right.
I'm following up with a lot of the women who've gone through the programs and I'm getting testimonials about what was the blocker to joining? And it comes down, I'd say almost 9 times out of 10, it comes down to that feeling of I have no time for something else, but nothing else is working. So I need to try this. So there's
Wow.
that debate, internal debate going on. And the women who go through the program, they learn to say no to things. They learn to establish boundaries. They learn to carve out time for themselves. And those all sound really simple, but they add up to more time, which is what they wanted at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, and that could be more time to just honestly go for a walk outside in nature. It could be go to bed earlier because you don't have to stress that you need to push yourself to do it tonight. It can wait till tomorrow. Or you don't need to sign up for the next committee just because they expect you to say yes. But they need to take that time to give themselves permission to decide, and that's it. It's the decision. You can decide whether you want to do it or not, but it should be your decision and you should have some input into it. And a lot of the women say they got their time back or find out they've put a way of justifying the time that brings them value, right? And they
Hmm.
know where they want to put their time into.
That's so interesting because, most people who sell something would say the number one reason that people don't buy their product or service is because of money. And it's indicative that your potential clients don't say money, it's time, which is
Yes.
exactly what you give them back through this process. But you actually didn't give them any more minutes or hours in the day. You changed their perspective, which is tough for, I work with a lot of hormone providers, and they typically will work with a patient to solve things they can test and they can measure. And that's what kind of like why I'm asking you these questions, because it's really hard to test other than a cortisol level, like
Right.
how stress is impacting your body. And when like you talked about sleep, and when a woman is lacking in progesterone and suddenly progesterone's introduced back into the body, sleep becomes a little more natural. They fall asleep faster, they stay asleep longer. But if you are stressed to the max, you're not getting that sleep no matter how much progesterone you have in your body. So it's kind of like a hand in hand little treatment plan.
Yeah, and often I'll get them to score various areas of their life in the
Mm.
beginning, right? We set sort of where are you in, where are you in your family? Where are you in your work? Where are you in your self-care? And at the end of the program, we go through it and where would you score yourself now? And so that's a nice way of going with a metric that, again, it's a bit of an arbitrary metric, but it's a heartfelt metric
Yeah.
because they get to evaluate where they are and where the needle's moved.
That's an excellent point because that's true in hormone clinics as well. There's a lot of symptom surveys. So all of the things that could be present because your hormones are out of balance at every appointment rate your relationship to these symptoms from 1 to 10, and then you can watch the numbers as they go up or they go down. Sometimes it's the hormones, sometimes it's other things in their life, which brings me to my next question. So, if you have a platform here right now to speak to hormone providers, those that are listening to this podcast, what would you want to say to them about what they should be looking for? What should they be asking their patients to kind of point out that maybe it's not just their hormones or not just their diet, but there's something else going on that stress is playing a huge part in? And I mean, whether they refer them to you or just to doing things to kind of alleviate that mind chatter, what are some of the things that providers could be asking or looking for?
Definitely one question that I find really interesting is picture yourself in the future and you get to talk to that future version of yourself
Mm.
and ask them what's working for them in that state. And then start asking the questions that, well, what did you do to get there? And what did you do differently? And if you had that choice, you know, where you are right now and where you see that future version of yourself, what are you doing differently? And it's almost like a way of getting the client to almost reverse engineer their solution. And the reason it works is because it's their solution. It's not something that you've prescribed necessarily to them. Obviously, you can make recommendations that saying, okay, now that you've told me these steps, I can help you make those steps. But definitely that idea of one of the activities I do is called a bridge activity. And it's sort of like you draw where you are currently on one side of the shore and all the things that are surrounding you. And then you draw the future side of the bridge and where you want to get to. What does that look like? And then I get clients to draw their bridge. And I don't tell them what bridge to draw. And some draw, drawbridges, but most of them draw really rickety, rope ladder with a few wooden planks between them. And
Oh.
I ask them, why did you choose to draw your bridge that way? And it's, it comes down to perceived obstacles and challenges and that lacking the faith in themselves to get across. And the fact that quite often, we joke that we're our own trolls under our own bridge because we get in our own way. So there's some you can do it with questions, you can do it with drawing, but there's that idea of what are the blockers between your current self and your future self and how would you like
Mhm.
to get there?
Wow, that's really, really good because obviously through drawing, they may not even realize what they're getting out of their system. Through questions, it may be a little bit more obvious. But the bottom line is most people, women especially, don't take the time to sit and think about what's the future that I want to have. And I mean, everyone has goals. What action steps am I going to take to get to my goals, which is more pressure? But what's the barriers that need to be removed to get to where you want to go versus action steps? So that's beautiful. I mean, I actually got a little verklempt there for a second when you said that. So let's change the topic a little bit because that's wonderful. Everything that you're doing is just so beautiful and so needed in this world. But you're an entrepreneur, just like the people that listen to this podcast, and you're trying to grow a business. And everybody always wants to talk about, like what does it take to find potential new clients? How are you getting the word out? What is sort of like your marketing plan or what is your communication plan so that you can bring your message to more people and what's worked for you?
Definitely. Like I go to where my, ideal clients are. And for me, that's LinkedIn because
Mm,
it's where a lot of professionals hang out. And I had to learn that platform again because, when I worked for a company, I just would reshare the company posts and I didn't really have to put myself out there as a brand. And as an entrepreneur, you are your brand, how you show up. And I had to learn to be okay with that, right? Putting myself out there and sharing my knowledge and being, vulnerable and getting used to that. And, it's building the know, like, and trust factor, right? The more you show up, the more people. And, there used to be that old networking thing where you had to show up at least 7 times for people to actually
hmm.
remember your name. But I'd say on social media, that's like triple that at
Yeah,
least.
at least.
At least, right? There's so much noise out there. But again, just being consistent and both with your message and showing up. So there's consistent in the time frame and consistent in the messaging. And also learning again why I'm doing a lot of these testimonials is getting the stories from the women in their own words.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the women use the word getting unstuck,
Mm,
whereas I talk about de-stressing. And so I'll probably be shifting some of my messages to include how they talk about their problems and the solutions they were finding because it's one thing for me to talk about my programs and my approaches. It's another thing for somebody who's gone through it to say, this is why I was nervous. This is what I found surprising and why it worked. And this is where I am now. And,
mhm.
that's why we love client journeys. And I
Yeah.
want to share more of that. And I'd say for practitioners, as much as you can share, obviously, confidential information, may generify it a bit, but share true stories because that's what's going to land with your clients, right? They're going to see themselves in those stories. And I think that goes a long way to building that trust, with your future clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the word that keeps popping up in my head as you're talking is authenticity, especially in the world where, we're have a love-hate relationship with AI. I mean, it's helping us do a lot of things more quickly and more efficiently, but it's also sort of drowning the messaging out there, whether you're on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, it doesn't matter. AI
Right.
is definitely, there's a gentleman that I follow from Big Boost Marketing called Uli. He talks about marketing as beige. And that's what AI produces, very beige marketing. And so yours is Technicolor because you are sharing authentically, but there's a cost to that. So you may not be a medical provider, but as a researcher, as a science background, I don't know, was that always easy for you to just come to the table and lay it all out on the table, or is that new for you? And what's that like?
It is new for me because, as a scientist, you do experiments, you publish in papers, you get peer review, right? So, but that takes a long time, right? Like whereas I could get off a coaching call and go, I just need to share this, right? So there's an immediacy that was lacking from the evidence-based approach. But that being said, because a lot of the women I work with know the science evidence-based approach, it's like I have to basically provide evidence, provide proof of what I'm doing works, you
Yeah,
know, and that takes time, right?
right.
Because you have to sort of, again, do your experiments, do your work, and then show how the results are real. And that's another thing with AI, right? Like a lot of these things that I'm doing are very individual, like how somebody expresses, their sort of aha moment is going to be very specific to them. And
Yeah,
that makes it unique and not beige.
yeah.
But those are all still drops in the beige ocean.
Right,
So,
right.
right?
Yeah, AI can't predict what one woman's bridge is going to look like.
Not at all. Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So, yeah, do
it's
you
a
have
huge
advice?
difference that way.
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're talking over each other. Do you have some advice for providers? Because again, I mean, even though it's a very different type of treatment, what you're saying is almost parallel. So you have a medical provider that went to school, whether they're a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner or a medical doctor, like they went to school, they learned something scientific, they had a eureka through science and research. They now
Mhm.
know they can help people. They have to be authentic to share. All of that still comes into play. So do you have any advice for them as a peer, how to start that?
The other thing that I used to do when I was going through all my degrees is occasionally I would do presentations to high schools, right? And
Mm.
so I had to present my research in a way they would understand
And pay
and
attention.
and relate to, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
pay attention, relate to. And I would say the more you can make your approach understandable and relatable, the easier it will be to have yourself understood. Right? Like just make it into, everyday analogies, right? Like, or present situations that come up like, oh, you went to the grocery store without your grocery list and now you're just randomly putting stuff in your cart because you're hungry. Everyone's
Yeah.
been there. We've all done that. And then build upon that with, and if you did this solution, suddenly now it's like you've got your list with you and you can pull it out. Like, I would say the more you can make your approach relatable, the easier it is to be understood. And you'll make it unique to yourself as well. And that'll make you stand out.
Yeah. And no surprise that what you just described is also not just relatable, but visual, which comes full circle back to, your interest in creativity and in art. And when somebody can visualize something, they can connect with it and it could become theirs versus just some theory that they're being told. Yeah.
And the nice thing with my work is, when I followed up with these women, some were months after they'd gone through the program, is they have snapshots of how they were feeling and thinking at that time.
Mm.
And so they're almost like living artifacts of their experience at their time, and they can reflect and see, have things changed? Are they different? What would I change about this picture now? What would I add? What would I take out? And so they can go back and forth. It's a tangible, it's literally it might be the like a Pictionary equivalent, but it's something that was in their head and is now manifest on paper. And they can refer back to it later on as well. So it's a nice snapshot of time as well.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. So what is your vision for the company? Where do you hope it goes?
Oh, I have lots of aspirations. It's just, again, time and effort and all that good stuff. But no, like I would love to have a podcast down the road where I bring on other creative practitioners and different things and how their work, helps people. That's one avenue that I'd love to do. I have a few ideas for books that I'd like to work on, and it's just I see all these avenues, and then I'd love to do in-person retreats. That's another thing
Mm,
I think that would
I could
be,
totally see that. Yeah.
yeah, like I'd love to have a group of women come and I could bring in other, health and wellness practitioners so we could have, maybe we have a yoga morning and maybe we
Hmm.
have a drawing morning. Maybe we have, somebody comes in and talks to us about nutrition. I can see lots of avenues where my work would integrate very well with somebody else's. So lots of ideas that way.
Will you send me an invite to that retreat when you do it?
Of
'Cause
course.
I want to be there. That sounds like so much fun. And I'm assuming that you work with people virtually, correct? Or do you see people in person?
Currently, because I live on an island, yep, do a lot of Zoom. But again, I would love to do some, yeah, retreats in person. And I'm not against working in person with people. It's just definitely, I would say I'm open to a broader audience just
Yeah,
because geographically, yeah.
totally. And you're in Canada, we're in the United States. And so, I'm sure providers are going to listen to this podcast and be like, I would love to learn more from you, or maybe even send patients to you. So how would they do that if they wanted to connect with you?
Oh, definitely. Well, my email's on my website, and certainly we could always have, a Zoom consultation just to talk about where things align, and quite happy to follow up with them directly after that.
All right, cool. Well, I'll make sure to put all of your contact information in the show notes. So if you're listening to this in the car, you can just wait till you get to wherever you're going and you can go look at it. This has been wonderful. I could listen to you for days. You're so elegant in the way that you communicate, and you have a very calming effect, which I think is important in the work that you do. Because if people are coming to you high stressed, and you kind of bring everything down to a very grounded level. So thank you for sharing with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I'm always happy to chat about this, and I'm always learning as well. Like everyone, that's part of the reason that I want to run a podcast because I love learning from people
Yeah,
as well too.
me
So,
too.
yeah,
Well, before I
that's
let you
down.
go down the road, but not too far down the road.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, so we have a little tradition here. My favorite podcast I listen to tons of podcasts. It's all I listen to all day long. But my favorite is The Diary of a CEO by Steve Bartlett. If you haven't listened to it, everybody out there, you should. But he does this thing at the end of his podcast where he asks a question that was posed by a previous guest for you, but they don't know who you are. So I
Okay.
have a question for you. And the question is, what was the biggest mistake that you made in your career? And what can you teach our listeners about what you learned?
Oh, when I first started, I thought I had it to be everywhere. So I
Mm.
had to be on Instagram, I had to be on YouTube, I had to have a blog, and I basically burned myself out trying to launch the business. And I thought, oh, this is not good. Not the point. I thought I should be learning from what I'm telling people, and I'm doing the complete opposite. And that made me feel a tad ridiculous because I was like, I should know better. And we all know the shoulds. We shouldn't should on ourselves. But yeah, so I had to dial it back and go, okay, you don't need to be everywhere at once. Just be somewhere consistently and go and build it gradually. So I had to rein myself in. And yeah, because otherwise I was going right down the paths to burnout again. So,
I think that's great, actually. I think that more entrepreneurs, more business owners should acknowledge that they don't take their own advice sometimes and then share the impact. I mean, I did that. If anyone's listening and they want to hear what I did, my last podcast of 2024 was me telling on myself of all the things I did wrong for the entire year of 2025. And yeah, and it was all the things I tell my clients not to do because we're all human and we make mistakes. And so the best way to learn is to experience what you've done, worked or didn't work, and then share it. So thanks for telling us about that.
no, hopefully somebody can avoid doing that because I don't
Yes.
recommend it.
All right. Well, this is Lexi Reed, and she is mindartwellness.com. And thank you so much for all of your time and attention today. We really do appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Jody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Hormones, the business of wellness. I hope that you're walking away with fresh ideas and real strategies you can use to grow your practice with profit and purpose. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show so you never miss a conversation. And if something you heard today resonated with you, do me a favor, share this episode with a friend or a colleague. It's one of the best ways you can support the show, and it might be exactly what they need to hear right now. If you want even more tools and support, go ahead and head over to acceleratedmedicalpractices.com. Until next time, keep doing the work that matters. Your patients need you, and I am cheering you along every step of the way.